welcome back to my channel. I would like to talk about the Netflix documentary, The Man with 1,000 Kids. This is my part 2 of my recap and review of the docuseries. So check out my part 1 if you haven't already. But I pretty much covered the first 1.5 episodes, and I want to do the second 1.5 episodes in this video. I just don't like making my videos super long, so I split it up into 2 parts. Now let's talk about where it all started to come crashing down for Jonathan. Jonathan had helped out this couple from Sydney, and he helped them with a child, and he was lying to them and acting like he didn't have that many other children out there, and he just acted like they potentially had a few other half brothers and half sisters. But this couple, one of them was a teacher, and she learned that one of her colleagues had used Jonathan as a sperm donor, and then she found out that there's even more half siblings in her community. In 2021, the New York Times interviewed a Dutch woman named Vanessa, and she shared her experience with Jonathan, and she said that she ended up welcoming a daughter with his sperm. When she had used Jonathan as a donor, she asked him how many other children he had out here, so she could know how many potential half brothers and sisters her child would have. And he allegedly lied to her and acted like he only had 8 other kids. After this lady had her second child through Jonathan, she received some shocking news about him after she connected with another single mother on Facebook who used Jonathan as a donor, and she had informed this girl that Jonathan had fathered at least 102 children in the Netherlands through numerous fertility clinics, and in most countries the limit is 25, and he just has over 100 children at a small area. And this lady, she confronted Jonathan, and he admitted that he had produced at least 175 children. When she started to get a little upset, Jonathan was like, "Look, I'm the good guy. I'm just helping women make their biggest wishes come true." And she clapped back and she's like, "Look, you're not helping anyone. You're doing more bad than good, and how am I supposed to tell my children that they could possibly have 300 siblings out there?" And Jonathan ended up getting caught up by numerous parents after they started talking to each other from social media and finding out about each other. One mother said she was finding different mothers, like sometimes she would find 10 different mothers in 1 week. She was contacting them and letting them know like how much of a serial donor Jonathan was, and all these women had admitted that they had been lied to by Jonathan. He had lied and misled these women and made them believe that he only had 5-10% of the children that he actually admitted that he really had. And Jonathan eventually got caught when these parents started connecting on social media, and more than 150 parents of Jonathan's children, they decided to contact the Donor Kind Foundation to try to get some help. So this organization helps children of sperm donation trace their roots, and they received more than 30 calls in a single week alone from mothers that had children with Jonathan, concerned that their children had the same father. And according to Dutch medical guidelines, a donor can only father 25 children to avoid possible incest and psychological problems. However, Jonathan had over 100 plus in the same area. The thing is, though, there's really not any laws in place to go after men who donate more than 25 times. There's no specific criminal law that the police can arrest you for, so it's kind of a gray area. And according to this activist, she revealed that breeding puppies and cattle is more regulated than donating sperm for human babies, which that is absolutely insane. And with that many children, I know damn well he could not name off all the names of his children. I would like to see him try to do that off the top of his head. He can probably only remember like 2 to 5% of his children's names, having that many kids. But apparently the walls started caving in around Jonathan once these mothers started reaching out to all these different organizations trying to figure out what to do next. And a fertility fraud activist ended up getting involved, and she actually spoke in the documentary, and she believes that Jonathan could have up to 3,000 potential children. She said, so with Jonathan and the specific sperm clinic he was going to, she said that he was going to Copenhagen once a month for 4 days for 4 years, and that's roughly 200 donations, and you can get about 15 straws of sperm per ejaculation, and if every straw makes a baby, that could be 3,000 potential children. And she said that is just one sperm bank alone, and he was known to have frequented over 11 different sperm banks. After all these women that he had donated had started to find out about each other, they felt like they were lied to and deceived. And they started to reach out to Jonathan, trying to get to the bottom of things. They were all asking him, like, how many children do you have? He was giving each person a completely different answer, and then when they would try to push the subject, he would be like, oh, I don't want to tell you how many kids I have because I don't want one kid to feel more special than the other. They're all number one in my book. Since he wouldn't give these women an exact number, they were just begging and pleading with him to please stop. They're like, look, the situation's already bad enough. Just please stop. They do not need no more brothers or sisters. You're just increasing the risk of incest to happen later on down the road. Please stop. And Jonathan refused to stop. And here's the thing, you know, a lot of countries have limits in sperm clinics, like I mentioned, but he would go to one country, hit the limit in the sperm clinic, and then he would do all this unregulated sperm donations underneath the table, and then he would move on to the next country and max out what he could do at the sperm clinic. And a lot of countries, you're only supposed to go to one sperm clinic, but he was going to multiple clinics and countries. And some countries, once he would hit the max that he could donate, they would let him keep donating, but they would just have to ship out his sperm to other countries since he had hit the limit in that country, because there may be limits in certain countries, but there's no international limit. And the families were like, man, we have to put a stop to this. This man is doing all this damage. He's refusing to stop. So they reached out to this fraud or fertility fraud activist, and she was like, look, here in America where I'm from, how we get attention on things, we go to the media. And so the family was like, if you do not give us an exact number of children, and if you do not stop donating, we're going to go to the media. And Jonathan pretty much was trying to blackmail them by threatening, hey, if you go to the media, then I will not have a relationship with your child. This was a big deal to some of the families because a lot of the families chose to use Jonathan as a sperm donor instead of going to a clinic because they wanted their child to have that relationship with their father, and now he's threatening to rip that away from them. So the mothers were like, okay, let's try to figure something out so our kids can still have a relationship with him. So one of the mothers came to Jonathan and she said, look, if you just meet up with me and 10 other mothers and give us the exact number of how many children you have, and if you just talk to us for a few minutes, then we will not go to the media. And Jonathan was like, okay, that sounds great. Well, they scheduled a time to all get together, and right before it's time to meet, Jonathan was like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't make it. I'm in another country. And while all this is going on, everyone's freaking out, and Jonathan is just traveling from country to country. You know, he has a YouTube channel where he posts vlogs, and every single week he was in a different country. And this has not been proven, but a lot of people were speculating that he was in all these different countries because he was donating sperm. A lot of these mothers from different countries would be willing to pay for traveling and for his expenses in order to get his sperm. And a lot of the mothers who had used Jonathan said that he was known to not have a job outside of YouTube. And I looked at his YouTube views, and before this documentary came out, he was only making like $5-10 for every video he was making. And he was only coming out with a video every day or a couple times a week, and it's just not feasible to make a living off of, especially living a lifestyle like that where you're traveling to a different country every week. The longer this goes on, the more he's putting everybody and their children more in danger. And so they're like, we have to put a stop to this. So they tried to reschedule 3 different meetings with Jonathan. He constantly had to reschedule because he kept saying he was out of the country. And after 3 times, they're like, look, I don't think he's going to meet up with us. So they decided to reach out to the fertility fraud activist, and she reached out to the New York Times. They spoke with the New York Times, and the New York Times came out with an article, and they ended up putting an article about him on the front page, and he was pissed, to say the least. Now I want to talk about a shocking twist I did not see coming in this story. I think this was in the second, yes, it's towards the end of the second part. This man sits down with Netflix, and he has like a mask on, so you can't really see who he is. They used a voice changer, so you couldn't really hear his real voice. But this man said he had some inside information, and apparently he claims, and this is all alleged, this is all coming from this guy, his claims, but he claimed that back in 2010, that there was this website in Holland that was a marketplace for donors, which was called Longing for a Child. And a lot of the women that were on this documentary used that website to get children from these sperm donors. And you guys remember that guy that we were talking about in the first part, that the lesbian couple went to go see about having a child with, but the guy didn't have good genes. He was bald. He had a big scar on the back of his head. This guy's name is Leon, and apparently he comes back into the story because this guy who spoke out claimed that Leon and Jonathan are extremely close, and he tried to act like Leon and Jonathan pretty much run that website, and he tried to accuse them of making all these fake profiles where pretty much no matter who you talk to or who you pick, you have like a high chance of getting set up with Leon or Jonathan. So you might find a page that says James and think you're talking to James, but in the end, you're going to get a donation from Leon. This man claimed that Jonathan and Leon were doing everything they could to deceive hundreds of women across the world to father as many children as possible. And this is where it gets crazy. This guy claimed that he was close with these two, and he said that Jonathan and Leon would, jack off into a cup, and he claimed that they would meet up with each other and they would swap cups, and I guess that they would pour a little bit of each of their sperm into each cup and then give it to a person. So when you get this cup, it has the sperm of 2 different men in it, and you don't know which sperm is gonna work. So it's kind of like playing sperm roulette. And I don't know if maybe that increases the chances of them getting pregnant, because I did notice a lot of the women say, oh, I got pregnant the first time, he's got super swimmers. But if you have 2 different sperms in there, I kind of feel like it would likely increase the chances of getting pregnant, because maybe if one sperm don't work, maybe the other will. But I don't know. That is just pure speculation. I don't know the science to back that up. But this is what this guy claimed. And that's kind of scary because, these women might be thinking that they're getting a baby from Jonathan, when in reality, they don't know that Leon's sperm's mixed in there too, and his sperm may be the one that ends up sticking and working. And one family got so scared after hearing this news that they decided give their daughter a DNA test. And 2 weeks later, they did find out that their daughter did belong to Jonathan. And this other lady came forward and claimed that she had heard the rumor too. Jonathan has denied these claims, and I hope that is not true. If it is, then that is so messed up. But after the family could not get Jonathan to sit down with any of the mothers, they went to the media, and it came out in the media, and they're like, look, he's still out here spreading his swimmers. We have to make something happen. And there really weren't any laws in place, like I said. And one of the mothers ended up reaching out to a lawyer, and the lawyer's like, I don't know if we can take this. Like I said, there's really not much in the law books about this. But they ended up finding one section that talks about, like, if you are putting other people at risk, then that could be considered criminal. And so they were able to take that and try to take Jonathan to court. He was eventually subpoenaed to go to court, and the court hearing ended up having to get rescheduled because Jonathan was traveling in another country, and he was in Kenya. And so some of the families were shocked, and they're like, man, I feel like he's up there donating sperm. So they go to Google, they start searching, and they came across this doctor that announced this, like, I guess, deal they were doing where they're offering to pay for, like, travel expenses, like the hotel, the flight, food, everything they needed, and pretty much give these different donors a 2-week vacation if they came down to Kenya and agreed to donate for 2 weeks straight. So pretty much they'd have to donate like every other day. And one guy claimed they like pretty much milked him like a cow the whole time they were there. And so they're like, oh my gosh, I feel like that's probably what he's doing in Kenya. And while they were doing research, they came across this Facebook page called Kenya Sperm Donors. And you want to know who the moderator of that group was? No other than Kyle Gordy. Kyle Gordy was on 90 Fiancé Love in Paradise. He's another serial donor. And the other two men who were admins and moderators in that group were serial donors as well. Joe Donor is pretty much like Kyle Gordy's like BFF donor friend. Like when I made a video talking about Kyle and exposing him, Joe tried reaching out to me saying, oh, you want to do an interview? I'll defend Kyle and talk to you about Kyle. And this other guy, Anthony, is a serial donor from another country too. And so someone decided to join that group to try to do some investigating. And this insider source ended up reaching out to those 3 donors, Kyle, Anthony, and Joe. And they found out Anthony, he admitted that he was flown out to Kenya to stay there for 2 weeks, but he wasn't allowed to leave until they had like 150 vials of sperm from him. And he said that he wanted to bleach Africa and spread his white seed. And I'm literally saying word for word what that man said, which is so freaking inappropriate to say. And this is the type of people that Jonathan and Kyle Gordy like to associate themselves with. And after this man admitted he was in Kenya, they're kind of assuming that he was in Kenya. They're like, man, he's got some balls to be subpoenaed to go to court for spreading his seed, while he may currently still be out here spreading his seed and putting out the court date. And after he put out that court date, he finally had his day in court, where he had to answer to the judge. Over 50 different families that had used Jonathan as a sperm donor wrote a statement against Jonathan to be used in court. And I just feel so bad for these poor families because they're just misled. They thought that they're one in a handful, when in reality they're like 1 in 600 plus. And the judge finally started grilling Jonathan in court, and she was like, how are you going to avoid these children growing up and, you know, hooking up with each other, with their half siblings and half brothers, if they don't know how many half siblings and brothers they have out there and who they all are? And Jonathan said, okay, well, when they have a social media page, we'll just come up with this special emoji and we'll have all of my children use this special emoji on their social media account. So that way they can identify who their half brothers and half sisters are. But that's just making the children still be a part of his identity, even though he refuses to have anything to do with them because he said he doesn't want a relationship with them since their parents ended up going to the courts. And I mean, what child, not all children are gonna want to have to put an emoji next to their name and tell everybody, oh yeah, I belong to this sperm donor that's been exposed. I don't see that being a realistic option. And what about the children who don't have social media? How are they supposed to know who their half brother and half sisters are? And the judge was like, okay, but that's gonna be hard to do. And what if they don't want to use the emoji? And Jonathan's defense was, well, you know, I'll just make sure I go to all the birthday parties and the graduations so all the other kids will see me and know I'm their father. But then the judge called him out and said, look, there's no way you're going to be able to go to 600 plus different birthdays and graduations, especially when you have all these kids in all these different countries. There's just no feasible way that you're going to be able to do all that. And Jonathan did not have a good answer to that. The judge set a precedent and banned Jonathan from donating any more sperm. If he donates sperm, he will be fined $100,000 every time he does so. And he must contact all sperm clinics and tell them to destroy any leftover vials they may have of his sperm. And I just feel like Jonathan really dropped the ball. Private recipients really rely on the honesty of the donor, and Jonathan was not fully transparent with the people he was donating to. He's like, oh, I don't understand why they're so angry with me. I was just trying to help them out. But it was all under false pretenses, and they were extremely misled. And at this point, they just need to make this man have a vasectomy. I think they need to make a limit where people can only have 10, 20 kids max. I just hope this man was taking common STD tests if he was hooking up with a lot of these women to get them pregnant, because otherwise his seed may have not been the only thing that he was out here spreading. And the producers of the documentary reached out to Jonathan numerous times to ask him if he wanted to comment or be interviewed for the documentary, and he declined every single time. It seems like this man was just having all these kids to feed his own ego and feel like he had a purpose in life. I feel like, yes, he felt like he was doing a good deed and that made him feel good, but I also feel like he enjoyed the attention and everything that came along with donating, like the free trips and the travel. And I don't think he did it for financial gain, because the different mothers that had talked to him about finances claim that there wasn't much money when it comes to donating sperm. But I just think that he wasn't thinking or caring about the consequences for every kid in the future. It's literally like he's living day by day and just focusing on how this affects him, but he's not affecting how this is going to affect his children and grandchildren in the future. And even the producer of this documentary pointed out that it doesn't just affect the children and the grandchildren, but it also affects the cousins, the nieces, the nephews. It goes a lot farther than we even have any idea. I will give Jonathan some credit, because at first it seemed like he wasn't taking much accountability for his role, but I have seen some recent videos that he's done where he did admit and say, look, I do realize I was being a little negligent and irresponsible with how much I was spreading my seed and not being fully transparent. So I will give him credit for that. But that does not take back all the irreversible damage that he has already done. But that is pretty much it for this video, guys. Let me know what you guys think about everything in the comments below. Have you watched this documentary yet? Do you plan on watching it? If enough of you guys are interested in this part 1 and part 2, let me know if you guys want to see where is Jonathan now and some recent updates and things that he's talked about since this documentary has came out and some interviews he's done. Let me know if you guys are interested in seeing that. But that's pretty much it. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.